So we're here at the ECAWAR information picket against Bill C-51. What are your concerns about Bill C-51 right now?
Okay, well, let's center on two things. The first is that this bill is a very profound attack on people's rights to political thought and action. It's called an anti-terrorism bill, but there's not been one shred of evidence put forward by Harper that this bill is necessary to deal with the question of terrorism or to protect Canadians or make them safer. Far from it. It creates a very broad category of offenses, which is anything which, it really amounts to anything which the Harper government declares is not in Canada's national interest, which, as we know, is anything from opposition to pipelines, the struggles of the First Nations people. In its clause about promotion of terrorism, it puts at risk, for example, the many thousands of Canadians who demonstrated last summer in support of the Palestinian people and their right to be and their right to resist. Because according to Harper, the Palestinian resistance is terrorist. And anyone who supports it then would be a supporter of terrorism. We think it's a profound attack on the rights of First Nations because it doesn't recognize, it's on the basis of Harper's definition, which doesn't recognize that we need nation-to-nation relations with the First Nations or their right to decide what goes on in their territories. So, when the government blocks on all sides any efforts by the First Nations to resolve matters through discussion, and then you're forced to do things like blockade and so on. Then that becomes something which, under this law, they can be accused of being a terrorist. And we know that he's used these words for a long time, like eco-terrorists and so on and so forth. So it really, I don't think you can say that anyone is safe from this. Just as an example, now it claims to exempt what is called lawful protest. Okay. Now, the lawful protest doesn't mean that you're violating the criminal code, or you're doing something illegal in that sense. Okay? For example, in Edmonton, there's a bylaw that you have to obtain a police permit before you carry on any, political a march or anything like that. Now, the city simply doesn't enforce this bylaw because it's so obviously a violation of our rights and the rights under the Charter and so on. It will not take anyone to court on it. So it's effectively dead that way. For example, the March tomorrow on International Women's Day does not have a police permit, but the police are going to be there and they're going to provide an escort. Because the law requires us to pay for that and we won't do it, you see. So legally, it's not a lawful protest. Because strictly speaking, we're violating the law. Even though the police, we even have all these arrangements with the police, never mind, when people simply have to go out on the streets right away because something so terrible has happened that you just have to act, So, all kinds of things are going to be placed under this. Same with the situation of all the workers whose strikes are declared illegal. Now they fall under this legislation, so a worker on strike can be accused of being a terrorist. Okay, now the second, another very, very important question is the expanded powers of CSIS. So if we go back in time, CSIS was created, I believe, in 1984. And it was created after these huge scandals about RCMP criminal activity and criminal wrongdoing, such as barn burning, stealing the lists of registered political parties, breaking into their offices, and actually one of their agents was actually blew off his arm while he was setting a bomb at the home of the owner, I think, of Steinberg's grocery chain, which was then going to be attributed to the, quote, separatists. So we have many, many examples like this, and that's why CSIS was set up, supposedly so there would be a sharp distinction between the investigation and the policing, right? So the intelligence gathering and police activities. So CSIS is now being made a full-fledged secret police organization with no accountability to Canadians, no oversight, no accountability. It's illegal to name a CSIS agent, it's all sorts of things. So they have huge impunity, and we're supposed to, be satisfied that they have to go before a judge to get a warrant to commit illegal activities and activities which are against your rights, okay? But we already have evidence from judges that CSIS comes to them and has misrepresented the situation, because the judge has to go on what CSIS tells them, and we already know that CSIS withholds evidence or gives erroneous evidence. So this is no consolation to Canadians at all. So, I mean, this is the definition of a police state. Now, there's many, many other things, for example, contained in this. We've had, Canadians have been active for years and years and years to get rid of security certificates where non-citizens could be held in indefinite detention. So the Supreme Court ruled that illegal. Subsequently, a new law was passed which continued many of the violations. What it did was it put the lawyer for the accused would be able to see some of the evidence against them, but not the accused. Now, under this new legislation, even those provisions are, basically trashed. So, I mean, we have a government which is complete contempt of the courts, and people feel that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms will ultimately, vindicate us on our opposition to this. But many people are also pointing out that there's a notwithstanding clause in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They can simply override it anytime they want. So we live in a country where you don't have a single right which is recognized as a right which cannot be violated. Everything can be violated, and this government is out to do just that. It is doing just that. It doesn't recognize any rights. So it's a profound situation that's being raised by this law. So we're calling on everyone to, get active and investigate. We're going to be continuing doing picketing and other things. There's a lot of very valuable information which people can acquire, and several publications here which are being given out, including Renewal Update. There's a day of action next Saturday with the rally at Canada Place, so we're calling on everyone to, all out for that. And also, write your member of Parliament, phone your member of Parliament, harass them, tell them that it's not acceptable, that Canadians are not going to accept this. And, together we have to find a way to defeat this bill and this government.
Okay, thank you very much.